Are you exhausted from constantly battling what life throws at you? What if peace wasn't found in control, but in surrender? In today's video, we're diving into one of the most misunderstood powers we have, the ability to let go. Inspired by the power of now and practical surrender techniques, you'll learn how to transform resistance into clarity, peace, and emotional freedom. Welcome to From Book to Life, where we turn powerful ideas into tools you can actually use. The dynamics of resistance, an in-depth analysis and commentary. The concept of resistance, particularly in the emotional and psychological realms, reveals a deeply rooted human tendency to avoid pain by rejecting or fighting against reality. In this framework, resistance acts as both a defense mechanism and a self-sabotaging force. The patterns of resistance, denial of reality, internal conflict, victim narratives, and obsessive what-if scenarios form what could be described as maps of suffering. Each of these patterns not only illustrates how resistance manifests, but also how it traps individuals in cycles of pain and stagnation. Denial of reality is often the starting point. It is a refusal to face facts, usually because the truth feels too overwhelming or threatening to our current self-image or emotional stability. While it might provide temporary relief, denial creates a fragile psychological foundation. When the mind is occupied with maintaining illusions, authentic growth becomes nearly impossible. The internal battle that follows is exhausting. Instead of using energy to create change or heal, individuals direct their energy toward resisting what already is. This inner war splits the self in two, the part that knows and feels, and the part that resists and represses. This tension drains vitality and clarity, leading to mental fatigue and confusion. The emergence of victim narratives adds another layer. These stories often serve to rationalize our suffering and project blame onto external forces. While they may validate real pain and injustice, they also entrench a sense of helplessness and passivity. When identity becomes tied to victimhood, personal power is outsourced, and the individual loses the agency to transform their circumstances. Then comes the fixation on what-ifs. A mental prison where one loops endlessly through hypothetical scenarios, regretting the past or fearing alternate outcomes. This obsession disconnects a person from the present moment and perpetuates anxiety, feeding the illusion that control over the uncontrollable is both possible and necessary. The consequences of not accepting reality are severe. Emotionally, resistance leads to exhaustion. The continual stress of suppressing truth and managing cognitive dissonance takes a toll. Energetically, it causes blockages. Creative, emotional, and spiritual energy becomes trapped in the act of resisting, instead of flowing toward healing or creation. The result is prolonged suffering. What could be a short-term discomfort becomes a chronic state of pain, simply because one refuses to feel it fully and let it pass through. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, resistance blocks evolution. Growth demands surrender, acknowledging reality, embracing discomfort, and choosing a new response. Without acceptance, transformation is impossible. One remains stuck in outdated stories and patterns, unable to move forward. In conclusion, the dynamics of resistance offer profound insight into why so many people remain trapped in suffering. It is not pain itself that causes the deepest wounds, but the refusal to face and integrate that pain. Acceptance is not about giving up. It is about stepping into reality with courage, presence, and a willingness to grow. Only then can energy be released, narratives rewritten, and healing truly begin. Conscious surrender practice, an in-depth analysis and commentary. The conscious surrender practice is a powerful protocol designed to facilitate emotional integration and personal growth through a structured, mindful approach. Its 4 stages: recognition, transformative language, surrender breathing, and reframing, create a progressive path from emotional resistance to liberation. Each step invites the practitioner to shift from control to acceptance, from fragmentation to wholeness. What makes this practice profound is its insistence on presence, self-awareness, and compassionate inquiry. 1. Recognition. 5 minutes. Honest inner observation. The first stage, recognition, requires radical honesty. It asks the practitioner to name what cannot be changed, to acknowledge the presence of pain, and most importantly, to validate that suffering without judgment. This is not a passive act of resignation, but an active process of truth-telling. By identifying what is immovable and accepting the presence of pain, we strip away illusion and face the rawness of our emotional landscape. In a world that encourages avoidance and numbing, this is a bold and healing act. It's the foundation of surrender, seeing clearly without denial or dramatization. 2. Transformative language. 3 minutes. Rewriting inner dialogue. Language shapes perception. In this step, the practice introduces transformative affirmations that emphasize disidentification from pain. By affirming statements like, "This is happening, but I am not this," the individual creates space between self and experience. This is crucial for emotional resilience. Suffering becomes a visitor, not an identity. These affirmations subtly restructure the inner narrative, shifting from victimhood to empowerment, from engulfment to observation. They remind us that we are the awareness behind the experience, not the experience itself. 3. Surrender breathing. 5 minutes. Releasing through the body. Breath is the bridge between mind and body, between conscious and unconscious. The surrender breathing phase uses breathwork to embody acceptance. Inhaling becomes an act of embracing reality. Exhaling, an intentional release of resistance. The mantra, "I accept, I release, I flow," further anchors the intention to yield rather than fight. This step grounds the practice physically, helping to dissolve the grip of mental tension and unlock trapped emotional energy. It signals to the nervous system that it's safe to let go, offering physiological support for psychological surrender. 4. Reframing. 7 minutes. From pain to growth. The final stage, reframing, transforms suffering into insight. It asks the essential questions. What am I learning? What strength is emerging? How can I grow from this? This step shifts focus from pain as something to escape to pain as a teacher. It cultivates emotional alchemy, turning wounds into wisdom. Rather than bypassing the experience, it mines it for meaning. This fosters resilience, purpose, and deeper self-trust. The individual is no longer a passive recipient of hardship, but an active participant in transformation. Overall, insight and commentary. What distinguishes this protocol is its invitation to face discomfort consciously, without bypass or suppression. It's a guided journey through emotional turbulence, not around it. The sequence is intelligent. It moves from mental clarity, naming, to emotional detachment, language, somatic release, breathing, and then to cognitive integration, reframing. Each phase builds upon the previous one, supporting a layered release of resistance and a deepening into self-awareness. More than just a coping tool, this practice is a blueprint for inner sovereignty. It acknowledges that while we cannot control external circumstances, we can cultivate how we meet them. The act of surrender here is not weakness, but clarity, the willingness to stop fighting reality and start flowing with it. This is where true strength lies, not in domination, but in openness, not in holding on, but in letting go. Acceptance frameworks. an in-depth analysis and commentary. The acceptance frameworks offer a psychological and emotional roadmap for understanding how individuals process adversity, resistance, and eventual transformation. Structured in 3 progressive tiers: total resistance, partial acceptance, and conscious surrender, this model effectively maps the inner terrain of emotional evolution. Each level reflects a distinct relationship with reality and, ultimately, with the self. What makes this framework so valuable is that it doesn't rush the process of change. It honors the complexity and non-linearity of human experience while pointing toward deeper awareness and integration. Total resistance, the threshold of pain. At the foundation of the framework lies total resistance, the space of complete rejection of reality. Here, the mind is locked in defense mode, first through denial, then anger, and finally through a collapse into victimhood. These stages are deeply human and, at times, necessary coping strategies, especially when confronting overwhelming circumstances. Denial protects from immediate pain. Anger gives the illusion of control. Victimhood seeks validation and sympathy. However, these emotional states are unsustainable in the long run. They block insight, drain energy, and reinforce the illusion that life is something being done to us rather than through us. Individuals in this phase often feel stuck, trapped in repeating emotional cycles because they are still trying to resist what is. There is no space for growth here, only the maintenance of suffering. Partial acceptance, the turning point. The next level, partial acceptance, marks a crucial shift. It is a liminal space, a psychological threshold where resistance begins to soften. This stage includes questioning, early understanding, and a tentative openness to change. It is not yet full surrender, but it holds the seeds of transformation. The person starts to ask, "Why am I feeling this way?" Or, "What can I learn from this?" This phase is fragile, yet full of potential. There is still discomfort, but it's no longer met with as much reactivity. The walls of resistance begin to crack, and through those cracks, light can enter. Here, the mind becomes more flexible, emotions are better tolerated, and the individual starts to regain a sense of agency. It is a powerful invitation to look inward with compassion and curiosity rather than judgment or blame. Conscious surrender, the emergence of freedom. The final stage, conscious surrender, is the culmination of the process. It is characterized by peace, flow, and growth. At this level, the person no longer fights against what is, but moves in harmony with it. Acceptance here is not passive resignation. It is a wise, empowered alignment with reality. The internal war ends, and from this stillness, clarity and purpose emerge. Surrender, in this context, is a form of strength. It reflects the maturity to let go of control, the humility to learn from pain, and the courage to evolve. It allows for emotional energy to circulate freely again, creativity to be reborn, and new narratives to emerge. From this space, transformation happens organically, not through force, but through presence. Final reflections and insights. This framework serves as a mirror, helping individuals locate themselves within the spectrum of resistance and acceptance. It offers both validation and direction. Validation that struggle is part of the journey, and direction toward a more expansive, peaceful way of being. What stands out is that growth doesn't require immediate transcendence. It begins with awareness and willingness. The model emphasizes that surrender is a process, not a switch, and that each level, even resistance, carries wisdom if we're willing to explore it with honesty. Ultimately, the framework reveals a deeper truth. Acceptance is not the end of the path. It is the door through which true life begins. Practical tools, an in-depth analysis and commentary. The Practical Tools section introduces accessible yet profound exercises aimed at cultivating detachment, emotional processing, and inner growth. These tools, the Cloud Meditation and the Transformation Journal, are deceptively simple in structure but offer deep psychological benefits when practiced consistently. They form a dual approach, one working through mindful observation, the other through reflective articulation. Together, they embody the heart of conscious living, meeting life as it is without resistance, while staying open to personal transformation. Cloud Meditation, the art of non-attachment. This meditative exercise invites the practitioner to visualize suffering as a cloud, an ephemeral formation that drifts through the sky of awareness. The imagery is intentionally soft, spacious, and non-threatening. Rather than resisting, suppressing, or analyzing the pain, one is encouraged simply to observe it. The instruction, observe without trying to change it, is radical in a culture obsessed with fixing and solving. It promotes pure presence, the ability to stay with what is without manipulation. This technique trains emotional neutrality, allowing thoughts and feelings to arise and dissolve without becoming personal narratives. The metaphor of the cloud gently reminds us that all emotional states are temporary. It cultivates psychological spaciousness, creating room between the self and the experience. Over time, this builds inner resilience and reduces the compulsive need to control internal states. It also activates a deeper layer of identity, the self as witness rather than as the storm. Transformation Journal. Reflection with intention. While the meditation cultivates stillness, the Transformation Journal encourages active engagement. It asks the practitioner to write down 3 key things: what cannot be changed, current emotional states, and potential lessons. This process brings clarity and containment. Naming what cannot be changed acknowledges the limits of control, an act of surrender in itself. Recording emotions allows for healthy expression and emotional regulation, helping to avoid both suppression and overwhelm. The final step, identifying possible lessons, is a conscious invitation to alchemize experience into growth. This transforms pain from something merely endured into something meaningful. It doesn't negate the suffering, but reframes it within a larger context of personal evolution. Over time, journaling like this strengthens self-awareness and encourages emotional accountability. It becomes a tool not just for processing, but for rewriting one's inner narrative. Commentary and insights. What makes these tools effective is their balance between being and doing. The meditation teaches surrender and receptivity. The journal fosters reflection and integration. They are inward-facing practices that do not rely on external change, but on inner reorientation. This makes them universally accessible, regardless of circumstance. Furthermore, they reflect a larger philosophical truth, that healing is not always about solving, but about softening. When we stop fighting what is and instead meet it with presence and curiosity, transformation arises organically. These practices don't offer quick fixes. They cultivate a lifestyle of mindfulness and emotional maturity. In a world that glorifies productivity and emotional suppression, the value of these tools lies in their gentleness. They invite us to pause, to listen, and to trust the intelligence of our own inner life. The result is not just relief from suffering, but a deeper connection with ourselves, one rooted in awareness, compassion, and quiet strength. Points of attention: a deep analysis and commentary. The Min. Points of attention. Section offers a thoughtful and necessary counterbalance to the broader conversation on emotional healing and conscious surrender. It highlights both the pitfalls that can derail inner work and the subtle signs of progress that often go unnoticed. These reflections provide not only caution, but encouragement, guiding the practitioner toward a more compassionate, grounded, and sustainable path of transformation. Traps to avoid: navigating the shadow side of acceptance. One of the most common and damaging misunderstandings in emotional growth is the idea that acceptance equals agreement. This confusion often leads people to either suppress their values or stay in harmful situations under the guise of being spiritual or at peace. True acceptance is not passive. It's a clear acknowledgement of what is, paired with the inner freedom to respond wisely. You can fully accept a reality without endorsing it. In fact, genuine change often begins with clear-eyed acceptance, not denial disguised as positivity. Another trap is judging your process. Emotional healing is nonlinear and deeply personal. When we compare our journey to others or impose unrealistic expectations on ourselves, we add shame to suffering. Self-judgment creates resistance, which ironically reinforces the very pain we're trying to release. A more helpful stance is curiosity over critique, asking, "What's really happening here?" instead of, "Why am I still stuck?" The urge for instant resolution is another form of subtle self-violence. It stems from discomfort with ambiguity and a culturally reinforced addiction to quick fixes. But emotional integration takes time. Rushing it often leads to superficial solutions that don't address root causes. Likewise, in validating your own pain, telling yourself it is not a big deal or others have it worse, undermines the legitimacy of your inner world. Every pain, no matter how small it may seem, carries the seed of something meaningful if we're willing to listen. Signs of growth, subtle shifts, profound impact. The second half of the framework wisely shifts focus to the quieter, often invisible markers of real progress. Less tension, whether physical, emotional, or mental, is one of the first signs that resistance is giving way to flow. Often we don't realize how much stress we carry until it begins to dissolve. A more fluid breath reflects this too. The breath is one of the most honest indicators of our inner state. Shallow, constricted breathing points to fear and control. Deeper, more relaxed breathing signals trust and openness. Noticing this shift can help validate that something meaningful is unfolding, even if it's not immediately visible on the surface. An expanded perspective is another key sign of growth. This means you begin to see beyond the binary of good, bad, success, failure. You start to understand your experiences within a larger narrative of learning and evolution. With this comes the return of energy, not necessarily in the form of productivity, but in aliveness, presence, and capacity to engage with life. Commentary and insights. This section is a vital reminder that growth is both fragile and profound. It encourages a gentler form of self-awareness, one that honors nuance and prioritizes presence over performance. It also reframes progress, not as a dramatic breakthrough, but as a quiet reorientation of how we relate to life. Most importantly, it teaches that healing doesn't require perfection. It requires permission. Permission to feel, to falter, to pause. By avoiding the traps of urgency, judgment, and false positivity, we create space for authentic transformation. And by recognizing the soft signals of growth, ease, breath, perspective, vitality, we learn to trust the process even when the destination isn't yet clear. In essence, this framework doesn't just guide behavior, it reshapes perception. It reminds us that healing is not about becoming someone new, but about finally becoming present with who we already are. Fundamental principle, a deep analysis and commentary. The concluding section of this framework offers not only a philosophical anchor, but also a poetic distillation of the entire journey of conscious surrender. It ties together the emotional, cognitive, and spiritual aspects of personal transformation through three powerful elements: a redefinition of surrender, a mantra of empowered acceptance, and a metaphor that embodies the path forward. Each component invites a deep inner recalibration, from control to presence, from resistance to fluidity, from fear to courageous trust. Surrender as strength, not weakness. the assertion that surrender is not weakness. It is the most courageous act of inner freedom, directly confronts one of the most deeply rooted misconceptions in Western culture, that power lies in control. In truth, control is often a mask for fear, while surrender, when conscious, is a bold act of self-trust and faith in life's unfolding. It takes far more strength to release than to grip, more bravery to be vulnerable than to armor up. This principle reframes surrender as an empowered choice, a deliberate refusal to be enslaved by fear, perfectionism, or the illusion of certainty. Surrender here is not about resignation or defeat. It's about alignment. It means choosing presence over projection, acceptance over denial, and allowing reality to be what it is so we can move with it instead of against it. This shift marks the transition from egoic struggle to spiritual maturity. The mantra, empowered acceptance. The mantra, I accept what is without losing my capacity to be, captures a subtle but profound psychological balance. Acceptance is often mistakenly equated with passivity or loss of identity. This mantra reminds us that true acceptance is not about becoming numb, indifferent, or erased. It's about reclaiming beingness in the midst of challenge. It's about saying, this circumstance does not define me even as I face it fully. There is also a message of dignity embedded here, that we can meet pain without being consumed by it, and we can acknowledge life's imperfections without abandoning our integrity or agency. It's a declaration of wholeness. The water metaphor, wisdom in flexibility. The metaphor of water is ancient and universal, and for good reason. Water is one of the most powerful elements, not because it resists, but because it adapts. It flows around obstacles, it reshapes the landscape, and it always finds a way forward. The line. The river does not fight the stones. It flows around them, is both instruction and reassurance. It teaches us that progress doesn't require force, and peace doesn't require perfection. Water embodies yielding strength, the kind of strength that doesn't break under pressure but bends with it. In a world obsessed with rigidity, hustle, and dominance, this metaphor offers a radically different vision of power, one rooted in resilience, responsiveness, and quiet confidence. Personal commitment, choosing response over control. The final insight, that your peace does not come from controlling the uncontrollable but from how you respond, is perhaps the most important takeaway of all. It places responsibility back where it belongs, not on shaping the world to our will, but on shaping our will to meet the world with clarity and grace. This shift from external control to internal responsiveness is the true liberation. It dismantles the exhausting belief that peace is only possible when everything goes our way. Instead, it invites a new kind of freedom, the peace that comes from within, independent of conditions. Final thoughts. Altogether, this principle encapsulates the essence of spiritual and emotional maturity. It's not about escaping discomfort, but transforming our relationship to it. It's about learning to meet life fully, honestly, and courageously, while maintaining the integrity of who we are. Through surrender, we do not lose ourselves. We meet ourselves more deeply. And in that meeting, we discover the kind of strength that no amount of control could ever offer, the strength to flow. At the heart of this lesson lies a quiet truth. Surrender isn't a giving up. It is stepping into your power with grace. When you stop resisting what you can't control, you start flowing with life instead of against it. That's where real freedom begins. Take a moment to ask yourself, what are you holding on to that's holding you back? And what might shift if you simply let it go? If this video helped you in any way, give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights like this. Check out the next video where we turn another life-changing book into a guide for your growth. You've got this, and we're here with you.